raise your spirits to the sky. Raise them to Ned Devine. God bless you, Ned. And may we be forever in your debt.
To Ned Devine.
Ned?
To Ned.
It was hoped the film Waking Ned would be the spark that lit the keg of Manx cinema success. For those who can't remember, the film is about a lottery winner in a small Irish village who dies as he's getting the news, and then the efforts of all the other villagers to pass off another villager as him, Ned Devine. In the event, it didn't get things going. The Manx film industry didn't explode, it imploded after the details of how many millions had been spent and how much had come back was revealed. But in the years of lights, camera, action, the Manx Media Corps were treated to some of the best-known names in British cinema to fawn over.
Oh my goodness, 5 children. But you're not due till Friday.
This holiday season,
I'm in.
you are invited to discover
Nephews and nieces.
Impossible. Not due till Friday.
Today is Friday.
Can't be. Smell that. That's Thursday.
a very unusual house
You're allowed everywhere except the greenhouse.
and a secret
Never, ever go into the greenhouse.
they were never meant to find.
I can see light. Come on. Something's inside it.
Stay back.
It could be dangerous.
I am a Samian Crustacea Decapodilium Wishosaurus. Got it?
It's magical.
I will grant you your wish. You want me to give you extra hand?
This October,
You're in for a treat.
Zoe Wanamaker,
What could possibly go wrong?
Keep getting us into trouble.
Kenneth Branagh, and Eddie Izzard as It.
Just started to have fun.
5 children and It.
Boom.
In 1941, there were worse places to spend the rest of the war.
Good morning, gentlemen. As uniformed combatants in the country, I'm afraid this is where you're going to be spending the rest of the war.
With comfortable rooms,
Pretty slick, huh?
entertainment,
Good shot.
and an open bar.
We're allowed out on day passes.
Day passes. You see, the boys promised me that they'll be back in the evening time if they give me their word of honor.
Their only inconvenience
He's up with a bloody Jew.
was the neighbors. Now 2 men on different sides are fighting for the same thing. Gabriel Byrne,
You look like a man that could use a drink.
Bill Campbell,
I volunteered to fight, not park my ass in Ireland.
William McNamara,
Auf Wiedersehen, Wiener Schnitzel!
and introducing Gene Butler. The Brill Cream Boys. The only way to make people stay
I just have this awful feeling I'll never see you again.
is to set them free.
And what's this?
Oh, it's a music box. My father gave it to me for my 6th birthday. He did the painting himself.
Oh, so your father is an artist too?
No, he always wanted to be an artist, but the family disapproved, so he took up law. Yes, the joke is I've never once heard him discuss a case. He goes to his club every day and never his office, so I don't really know what he does.
Oh dear.
Oh, Wigan is valuable.
I'm afraid, Miss Potter, your reputation is now officially dented. Ah, let me teach you how to dance. Do you dance, Miss Potter?
No, well, not well.
Now, I make a terrible hash of it too when I try, but the words are very sweet.
I don't know the words. Will you sing the words?
A trio of the films that brought the stars to the island. 5 Children and It, with Ken Branagh and Eddie Izzard, amongst others. Izzard superbly voicing It. The film right at the start of the big drive to make man a film capital, The Brill Cream Boys, from 1998. in which the island stood in for an Irish World War II POW camp, and Miss Potter with Renée Zellweger and Ewan McGregor, as the Manx public wrestled with how exactly the island was making money through the influx of filmmakers and actors. It evolved around VAT. One MHK in particular asked, how much money are we putting in and how much are we getting out? Kate Beecroft wanted a committee to look into the financial mechanics of Cinema NX, as it was named. She had a losses figure of 26 millions in mind.
Well, that was from a previous written answer which details each film, which was under the authority of Cinema NX and which Pinewood Film Advisors advised on. And it details which film has lost what's been written off, if you like, on each film. And it totals over 26 million.
More than 100 films and TV shows produced here, producing millions in VAT and other taxes. There's a tale told of a cheque for 60 millions that arrived in the Manx Treasury just before the budget was due to be presented. The problem was how to allocate such a figure without drawing too much attention from elsewhere. In the event in 2007, the VAT rules changed and the queue of those wanting to film here shortened dramatically. But in the early years, it all seemed to be going very well. Very, very well. In 1998, a film called Stiff Upper Lips arrived with a host of British household names, including Peter Ustinov. Dry, witty and urbane was interviewed by David Collister.
So Peter Ustinov, and I'm assuming, of course, that this is your first visit to the Isle of Man.
It's very well assumed.
Tamara was here about 18 months ago as Lady Bracknell, so we get two Ustinovs after thousands of years without you, I think.
Yes, it started me thinking of what Lady Bracknell's father must have been like. I don't really feel like it. A handbag? I don't think so.
Now, Stiff Upper Lips is an intriguing title as far as you're concerned, because you've used, of the face, I think, Sir Peter, you use the lips a good deal, don't you? And you certainly used to in the early days, when you were doing impressions and so on.
Oh, yes. Well, I've been given lips. It's pity not to use them. I don't usually have them very stiff, but they didn't want me to wear a moustache because they thought that would be conventional. I rather agree with them. I feel much better without one, so that my stiff upper lip can be judged at its face value.
Tell me about the character you're playing.
Well, he's a kind of colonial buffer and duffer, pretty loud, with a very strident and unpleasant voice, they very often have, and quite unable to pronounce his R's, so his name is Hollis. And he's a man who is, I suppose, a womanizer, except he lives in India and doesn't see many women. They're all shrouded in clothes, and he obviously hankers after them. When white women arrive, he is not really himself, if you see my point.
Was this something, when you read the script, was this something that attracted you straight away, the character, was it?
Yes, it's an absurd kind of character, but I've seen several of these. There are still, you suddenly come across them, and one is as surprised as if one met a dinosaur suddenly to see one, because they're all dodo. They are very, very peculiar people. I remember one during the war, on a troop ship going over to North Africa in a gale in the middle of the Atlantic, where we were chased by German U-boats, and we had a ship's concert because we should have arrived in Algeria by Christmas, but we had to spend Christmas out in the mid-Atlantic in a gale, and he organized a ship's concert, would you believe it, with a Maori group who were on board, and I was there, and I was asked to do my party turn, I think on E deck, or the nearest to the keel you could get, where it was particularly rough, particularly hot, and many people were throwing up. And we performed our ship's concert in this atmosphere, and afterwards the entertainment officer who'd organized it, who was an elderly captain with a monocle, I don't get those very often.
Not now.
No, not now. And he got up and, to the very few people who were left in the auditorium, said, I want to thank everyone concerned with this ripping show, and most especially this troupe of the talented Aboriginals. Oh, you can imagine.
So really, you're bringing him back to life a little.
Well, that is, he was a prototype, but there are several others of that ilk.
Looking back on your film roles, is there one that you would like to be remembered by?
No, I'm not sentimental at all in that respect. I don't care about who remembers what. I shan't be there to enjoy the memories, so why do I have such enormous consideration for other people's sensibilities? I was once asked what I'd like written on my tombstone, and I suggested keep off the grass is as good as anything. I don't see why one is sentimental.
Filming for Stiffs, as it was named, took place, amongst other places, at Castletown Railway Station.
Take this running. There you go. Yeah. Okay, rehearsing and background action. And action!
You could feel the pulse beat a little quicker. Not your own pulse, of course, but then we were packed quite tightly as the railway station shot was rehearsed and rehearsed. And while I was waiting, I sought out line producer Simon Scotland for a few words on what was going on.
At Castletown, we're here basically all of today to shoot the exteriors of the train, and then when you actually see the film finished, the image is shot inside the train. We're actually going to be shooting down in the shed in Douglas and then putting the images in the background, because it's just not the scenery you see on the Isle of Man here. There's some rather bizarre events that will be going on in the background, so we have to do it both ways. But it's a full day here out of the station.
There's this famous thing about you have to shoot about 6 weeks to get about 2 minutes film. I mean, how much film would actually be shot here? How much will appear in the actual finished product?
Right, we would probably actually load about 3,500 to 4,000 feet of film stock through our camera in any one day. And if we get 3 minutes, we're doing very well.
3 minutes?
3 minutes a day, and there's 75 people here.
I suppose you're fortunate the sun's shining today. You couldn't get a much better day in March. Does that help your cause?
It does help us, of course. The only problem with sunlight here is we've got a great big engine shed that's casting a large shadow, which means our lighting people have to sort of put some sun in where the engine shed was.
You were up early this morning. I was talking to one or two of the local actors here. They were up at 6. I think you started filming about 7, was it?
I think, yes, we're on set at 7. First of all, a little bit further down the line.
Down in Douglas, yeah.
Down in Douglas, shooting basically the train passing through the countryside and through a few tunnels just to cut in. But this is the meat of the scene. It's from the opening of the film where the two leading gentlemen arrive back home for the start of their journey around the world.
It's a fairly small train. I mean, is that sufficient for your purposes?
Yeah, it's a very cute train, and it's fairly comical, and it's a comedy, so it doesn't really matter at all.
Cute? Now, filming is a complicated business, and you have to be disciplined when you're around the cameras and they start rolling. Shh. Pardon? At one stage, a car wash opposite started up, so a man had to be stationed next to it to stop it being used when actual filming was underway, or the shop might have to be scrubbed. A clumsy pun, but all I could find.
One film that attracted plaudits for, in particular, the portrayal of Orson Welles by Christian Mackay, who acted along with Claire Danes and heartthrob Zac Efron, was filmed at the Gaiety Theatre, amongst other places.
I am Orson Welles, and every single one of you stands here as an adjunct to my vision. You want a career in the Mercury Theatre and in everything else I plan to do? Then remember one simple rule. I own the store. You don't like the way I work here? There's the door. Find somebody else to star you on Broadway. We open tomorrow. I'm proud of every member of this company. Every single one of you has come through. You're a magnificent company, on par with any theatrical company in the world. And after tomorrow, every literate person in this city is going to know who we are. They'll be lining up for the privilege of seeing our work. Now let's run through it again.
It earned much praise from Mark Kermode on BBC Radio 5's Film Review.
He does that thing that Anthony Hopkins, Sir Anthony Hopkins, does when he's doing Nixon, which is that although he doesn't actually look like Nixon, he somehow pulls his shoulders and puts his chin out in a certain way that makes him start. He has the physical resemblance without actually looking anything like him. Well, in the case of Christian Mackay, he does the thing that Wells did with his eyebrows, but it's not just somebody doing an impersonation. It's
what
not.
Was it that he did with his eyebrows?
Well, I can't do it, but Wells had a very sort of, you know, the incredibly famous shot in The Third Man when the camera comes down and fires finds him coming out. It's one of the most famous shots in cinema. You do know the one. You will have seen
what
it.
What are his eyebrows doing?
Well, I can't do it because if I could, I would be Wells. Plus, it's radio.
It.
Well, essentially, he slightly sort of furrows his brow, but his brow doesn't crease in the way that anyone. And it's like one goes up and one goes slightly down, and he looks at you quizzically. And the sense that you have from the Orson Welles look is that he's looking at you, laughing at you, agreeing with you, knowing what you're thinking, and thinking all those things, and thinking that in that moment you're the person he wants to be talking to, but he's got the better of you anyway.
Damn,
at least that's what I think Orson Welles does with his eyebrows. Those are very expressive eyebrows, and Christian Mackay does the same thing. If I was Linklater and I was doing this movie, because Linklater wanted to do it for a while because he's got a thing about Orson Welles, and who hasn't got a thing about Orson Welles? And it literally, I'd love to have been there at the moment when he sort of just went, that's it, we're home dry. Honestly, if nothing else works in the movie, if we get that guy on screen doing that, we are absolutely home and dry. So that's the first point. Second point is, there's so much else to like in the film. It's difficult for it not to be kind of overshadowed by that. Second point is Zac Efron, who I'm a big fan of Zac Efron. Zac Efron, some people kind of raised their eyebrows, not in an Orson Welles quizzical way, but in a kind of critical way about Zac Efron doing effectively what's a serious role. Although there is a romantic comedy element within the thing. It seems to me there's a terrible snobbery now about anyone who comes out of song and dance background. Zac Efron can sing and dance. We know that from the High School Musical things. He moves like Fred Astaire. That guy walks like a proper song and dance man.
I certainly earned the admiration of my daughter, be it for a short space of time, when I told her I had exchanged a few words with Zac. I was also able to talk at one time with Sir John Mills, which I regarded as a great privilege. Although he was struggling with his health, he was superbly professional. I even have a photo of myself with the great man. But it wasn't just those in front of the camera who notably arrived here to take advantage of what was, for an hour, a far fiercer and sweet, in terms of getting finance, the good times. Also over here were directors of note. One in particular was Lewis Gilbert. Now, many won't be familiar with that name, but he produced dozens of films, and amongst them were numbered Reach for the Sky, Sink the Bismarck, Alfie, the film that made Michael Caine along with Zulu, Educating Rita, Shirley Valentine, 3 James Bond films, You Only Live Twice, The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker. He was filming down in Castletown when I spoke with him.
Looking back over your career, I think one of the things that speaks volumes for your films is that they get shown a lot on television, and it's so easy just when they're on to sit down and enjoy them again. They still have that quality.
Well, thank you. But it's very strange. Obviously, I've been directing films now for over 50 years, so it's very strange for me when these very old films come up on television, something I did probably 40 or 50 years ago, and it's rather amazing to see the sort of very young men playing in the movie now either died or very old men. That's a very strange experience.
I suppose Michael Caine, obviously, is very, very apparent at the moment, and he, of course, was in Alfie with you.
Yes. Well, I've done 2 films with Michael, and that also was a very enjoyable experience.
When you were shooting the films that were shot in the war, Carve a Name with Pride, Reach for the Sky, the heroes were very identifiable. The role of hero, perhaps even anti-hero, has changed dramatically.
Well, I think that's true, but you've got to remember that during the war, there were many, many heroes, and you only made films about heroes. You wouldn't want to make a film about a coward or something like that. So at the time we made those war films, of course, everybody had experience of war. They were made usually in the 50s and 60s possibly. But your audience at that time had all had close experiences with war. Today you'd have to be 60s to 70s to have had that experience, so it's much more difficult to make a war film today.
I think you went to the cinema for different reasons. You went for escapism, you went to feel uplifted. These days you seem to go for different reasons.
Yes, because now, of course, you have television, and television is a daily experience. Way back in the 50s, the cinema wasn't a daily experience. It was once or twice a week experience, and you did it accompanied by a couple of thousand people, because in those days you had super cinemas, and there were very few cinemas under 800 seats or 1,000 seats. A lot of them were 4,000 or 5,000 seats. So it was a different experience.
The 3 Bond films, were they fun? With Roger Moore, they were designed to be fun. Were they fun to shoot?
Oh yes, they were. We had some of the biggest sets ever erected in those films, and it was fun because it's like you're a young boy with lots of toys to play with when you do a Bond film.
And Roger Moore never seemed to take it too seriously either.
No, Roger didn't take it seriously. That's why I think he was so good, because it was very tongue-in-cheek with Roger. It was a bit more serious with Sean, but Sean also had a wonderful sense of humour and a wonderful way of delivering the line, and he was very handsome and macho. And of course he made Bond in his own image, really. I mean, because the Bond of Ian Fleming was shaded towards Roger, really, very English and very... Sean was Scottish, very macho, and he made Bond into Sean Connery, really.
Because he did look capable of doing the violent things he was supposed to be doing. Whereas Roger, you always thought, well, would he be capable of assassinating people?
I think that's possibly true. Roger was a much more lightweight Bond in that sense. I mean, I think when Sean killed somebody, I mean, you thought they were dead. When Roger did, you weren't too sure.
That was escapism, of course. Now, Shirley Valentine was another form of escapism. It really hit a chord, because a lot of people dream of going to Greece and basically staying there.
Yes, I think that's why it was successful, really, because women, practically married women, and it had a great appeal to them, because they understand that after 20 years of marriage, you're liable to be treated as part of the scenery by the husband, and when your children grow up and you've never really worked but really spent your life looking after the children and watching them grow up, etc., and looking after your husband, as you end up, as she did, talking to the walls out of sheer loneliness. You can be very lonely in a marriage, and I'm sure that was part of the success. And it was strange how it attracted a younger audience, because I think they saw their mum and they saw their dad and they saw their relationships, and I think it hit home to young people as well as it did to middle-aged people.
Generally, a lot of films now obviously go out and about, they're going outside locations, and at last the British Isles seems to have woken up to the fact that it is very good business, and of course here in the Isle of Man.
Yes, it's not only very good business, but we do happen to live in a very, very beautiful country. In England, Ireland and Scotland and Wales. They're all beautiful. And this is the first time I've been to the Isle of Man, and I'm staggered at the amount of beautiful, beautiful scenery that you've got in such a small space of an island. And it's very curious. You've got every kind of scenery here.
Famously, you have a great eye. You don't, I think, use monitors and all the bits and pieces. You look at a shot and then it tells you that's the right shot.
Yes, I don't like seeing... some directors like to have a sort of monitor of a television set near the camera, which they look into when the scene is being played. But to me, I like to see the actors. I like to see and feel the warmth that an actor engenders, and hopefully he knows I'm there much more than if I'm somewhere else looking at a television set.
Now, this question must have been asked hundreds of times. Of all the actors and actresses you've worked with, who impressed you the most?
Well, that, of course, is a very difficult question, because, as I've said, I've made, 40 films or so, so I've worked almost with everybody. And I must say, most of them, if they were English, were nearly all good workman actors, whereas that wasn't always the case in America. I mean, American actors very often are very temperamental, whereas English actors come in the morning, do their job, and go home at night, and to them it's just a job. They're very, very well trained. American actors don't seem to be so well trained, because they don't have the advantages we have in England of wonderful theatre and very good acting schools and so on. In America, they tend to pick you because you're beautiful, and then you get trained up on the job, as it were.
The Manx film industry was a brief flash in the island's fiscal firmament. Perhaps one day we shall again get film companies coming over to enjoy the scenery this time, and there is much disparate scenery in a small area. In the meantime, we can relish the memory, also acknowledging those who say it came at a considerable cost. But when we look back with what we had, we can lift the glass to celebrate the memory, the shape of films that came.